sources, grants, what have you.
Yes.
It's probably 6 or 7, probably 7% of our budget this year. Our total budget is coming from non-North Reading tax revenue.
And you add the various user fees and stuff in that too,
Right.
right?
Yes, that's
that's
it all.
another-
That's all of it.
yeah.
Yes, Jerry.
Right.
Let's accentuate that. We've talked about ERA, but you're right, Jerry. You know, the bus fees that people pay, extracurricular fees, full-day kindergarten, all of
Athletic
those
loads.
fees buttress our account.
Yep.
Cal, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we show a 6%, 6% reflects the amount of money that we need to balance a level services budget. But isn't the increased spending only 4%? Because the $470,000 is a decrease in funding. That would be 2% of that overall deficit. Is that correct?
That's a great point.
I mean,
Yes.
that would be, yeah, okay. So basically, it's a 4% increase in spending, but a 6% deficit.
Thank you. Well put. And that's important to emphasize, because when you are looking at the impact to the town, it's 6%, but it's not because our rate of spending is
going up,
increasing,
right.
but rather it's because our external sources, our third-party dollars,
Right.
are decreasing.
But our rate of salary seems to be going up over 2 years by 10%, unless I'm incorrect on that. It went from 19,089,000 to 20,879,000.
That's
Mike,
about,
you're correct.
that's about right.
You're correct.
That's just about right.
And that's,
A little less than 10%.
Yeah.
and
Probably
that's
about
one of the
9%.
things that historically, because of the structure mainly of the teacher's contract with the built-in steps, that when you add the steps, average step to, well, they haven't had much of a cost of living last few years, but it comes out to about 5%. That's,
A little under 5%, and 50% of our teachers are getting a step raise every year. So that's, right there is 4 or 5% just to handle the step raises.
right.
What was the national average of an increase last year?
I don't know.
The year
I
before?
I can
Not at the education level, but just in general, what are people experiencing? Because I noticed that Social Security's down, they're
Yeah.
not gonna increase that.
Well, this is part of the whole, you know, the whole issue of the way teachers' contracts are structured, that they start much lower than they probably should, and then you have to, historically, you've had to find a way to get them to a higher level.
This isn't a cost of living adjustment.
Right.
This is a built-in
It's built into the- right.
salary structure.
No, understood what the step is versus
Right.
cost of living.
So, but that's a, you know, that's
It's really, that's a tough battle
Yeah.
because, I don't
It
know,
is.
it's hard to
it's hard. It's
push this out to the rest of the
It's almost
town.
impossible to keep up with it. And
Understand,
Carl's,
right.
you know, we make that point. Most of our increase every year is salary related, which means the educational costs and supplies and things like that, we rarely, if ever, add money to those budgets.
No, we get some relief when you have teachers that are retiring, leaving at a higher rate than teachers that are coming in to fill those
Understood.
Yeah.
positions. So there is some relief there. But to adjust the steps is essentially to, and when I say adjust, reduce the steps would be essentially to give the teachers a reduction in pay. That's really what it
Or,
comes
to,
down to.
or you have a new system where you start teachers at a higher salary and the only raises they get are cost of living raises. Those are the two things to, but it's a tough battle.
If you started the teachers at the highest step level, then you would see a small change each year.
Right. But the first year.
But the first year
You'd
that
be
you did
bankrupt.
that, you'd be killed.
Yeah, I think if you looked at other contracts, that would essentially be reinventing the wheel at this point in time. Not that we couldn't reinvent the wheel, but I'm not sure how we would do it.
I think it's going to be a state. At some point, the state's going to step in and it's going to have to look at how contracts are structured because.
Think
But
state's
we
gonna
can't
step
keep
in?
increasing 10% every 2 years. I mean.
No, I
You're
know
the only
that's
ones that laughed at
that's
that.
the problem.
Okay.
That's the built-in structural problem for
Is Mask,
every school district.
Is Mask doing anything for that right now? Are they
I don't know. I don't
Well,
think it's.
positioning anything like that?
See, the only solution, Mike, would be to turn around and essentially establish a salary, a flat salary, or a 2 or 3 step level salary structure. You'd have to fund that, and then now you'd be at that level of funding going forward every year, with the only cost of increase being
cost of living.
a modest COLA increase. So I'm not sure. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, I've studied these contracts till I was blind, and you know, I don't know how you resolve it, because the bottom line is the amount of money that you're spending is gonna be basically constant, and the increases are because of the turnover in staffing. You get teachers to a senior level, they're at maximum pay, and then you have, in the case of this district, over the last several years, we've had anywhere from a 20 to 25% roll turnover.
This
So
year we
now-
didn't, but
Yeah, a little less this year, but you have teachers come in, and if they're at step 3 and they go to step 4, it's a 4% increase. I mean,
Yeah.
almost every one of those steps is maybe a couple of them in there that are a little less than that. But that's how they get to their maximum pay, which is competitive and consistent with every other school district around us, no question about it,
yeah.
you know?
I think the overall structure is, it basically is just not a model that sustains the number of teachers that we need, and that makes it hard for us to make choices. But sometimes the only tool we have is to reduce staff, and that means teachers who haven't been around long enough are the first ones to go. And that's what I think about when I think about teacher salary. So, oh well. There is really no other way. I mean, and we got a fantastic contract this last
The last one
cycle
was-
was phenomenal, so, you know, we don't
that's-
have that many tools.
That's
at
the
this
other
point.
thing, it would have been 10% anyway, but you saw a bigger jump between
10 and 11.
10 and 11, because in 10, they got no cost of living, and they got half their step raise. So
Believe it
they
or not.
essentially
Halfway
took,
through.
they agreed to a pay cut,
took a
because
pay
those
cut.
step raises are built in, and we
Yeah.
cut the pay in half, and then it was made up in fiscal 11. They went back to their original steps that they should have been on. But you're right, it's 5% a year, no matter how you look at it.
Yep.
And that's not sustainable when 80+% of your budget is salaries, and the town revenues aren't growing at that rate, nor are state revenues.
And our staffing has remained level for the
Yeah.
last, I don't know, 3-4 years, Carl?
Yeah.
So,
It's
yes.
level staffing.
And we
Cer-
could use
certainly
more
at the te-
staffing.
Yeah.
Certainly at the teacher level it has.
That's
So,
good points.
finishing up, at the bottom, we tried to identify the components of the increase. As you can see, it says increase over previous year, 1,381,000, and then below, we broke out the components of that increase, so you have a sense for what is driving the increase from year to year. And the two largest components of that increase, which amount to over $1 million of that increase, of course, is the decrease in ARA funds and the costs that we were just describing, those being the teacher increase in steps that are built into the contract.
No, Carl,
Yes.
I know the ARA funds are being decreased, but didn't we get some additional
Yeah, I
federal
was gonna
funding
ask
for
that,
2012?
that 325 or 300, is
Yeah.
that built in?
This is the net of all
Okay.
of the pluses and minuses.
So that's
of
built
it,
in there,
yes.
you've built the
Yeah.
342 or 25,
Yeah,
whatever, okay.
339, that's, yes, that decrease in ARA funds, it probably should be renamed, it should be named, net change in
Net
offsets.
change in
Yeah.
federal funding, or
But the
NARA.
primary component of that change is ARA, so I thought it was important to point that out. We have included in this preliminary first look a salary pool, which is based on the recommendation that the committee provided us to set aside should there be collective bargaining for the 150 or so employees that are working without a contract. So this does include funds for that purpose. And it also, on the bottom row there, special education tuition, it does itemize and identify the increase from year to year in special ed tuition that we're now forecasting. I'm comfortable in saying these numbers are going to change as we move forward, and I think I'm fairly comfortable saying that this, I don't want to call this the worst-case budget, because we haven't really vetted this sufficiently with the committee and the superintendent and administrative council. There may be other things that become identified, but when you provide a budget this early, you tend to want to be conservative in every facet so that you're not caught unaware. So unless something very unusual happens, I don't think that the final preliminary budget will be too different from this or too much higher.
Carl,
certainly.
one thing I also want to point out is the amount of money that comes to us through town sources. For fiscal 10, the increase, from 10 to 11, the increase was about 1.4%. And I believe from 9 to 10, it was even less than that. I think it was in the 1 or even less than that.
Yes.
And that is with the town being extremely generous with the funds they have. in helping us out to reach these budget levels. And as Carl said, so our budget this year that the town is funding is $23,143,886, but our total budget is $25,018,520. So we have $1.874 million in federal, state,
And
user fee funds that are supplementing our budget. And fortunately, we made the decision 3 years ago or 2 years ago, whenever that was, to hold on to some of the ARA funds for this year, or we'd be in even worse shape.
The other thing we gotta point out, Cal, too, in this fiscal year 12, this is our increase to maintain what we consider level services. This doesn't even take into consideration what the revenue projections are, because revenue projections could put us in a further.
Well, it does,
deeper
and
hole.
I actually, and this is, I'm not fond of the phrase, but it's kind of the phrase that Michael coined. It's level services minus. We got to remember that it's level services,
Light.
but it's really level services light. It's really not, because we've cut things that we've never restored in the budget.
But we still don't know what the revenue projections are.
Well, I can tell you that based on our and again, very early, I think there was about a $900,000 deficit for us and $400,000 for the town. Correct, something like that.
Yes.
Now that's based on very early. That's based on, I believe that was
Very early.
flatlining state aid also, and most people are saying there's going to be at least a 5% cut in state aid. Although hopefully Chapter 70 won't get cut because the state would have some legal issues to deal with.
So-
But if state aid's cut if state aid to local cities and towns is cut, that will have an impact on Chapter 70 because we have the 66-34 split, and the town will need a little more money.
I thought state aid would get cut if we passed the 3% sales
No,
tax.
they're still projecting
They're
for
still projecting
next year
regardless.
at least a 5% cut. Although the good news is tax revenues are ahead by about $600 million in the first 4 or
just
5
means
months
that
of the
there will be
fiscal
no
year.
scale.
So actually,
vote.
900,000
Right.
isn't as bad as I thought it would be. I mean, but that's obviously
Well,
a very early
right.
projection on revenues.
It's an early projection on
Yeah.
revenues.
All right.
You know, I think the town's being conservative as usual, but
Yeah.
I don't think they're being crazily conservative. I mean, we may collect a little more money in excise tax, vehicle excise tax, and there may be a little more in the meals tax, but it's not 900,000. I can tell you. So,
Can I suggest
Sure.
one thing to Carl real quick? Yes, please. I think you should put that line item with the federal aid,
the plus.
the plus sign. Yeah, I really do.
So Carl, if you had a decrease in our funds would be almost 800 or 700,000, and then add the 326. You know what I'm?
Comes out to the same number, but.
So in other words, split, provide more detail?
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to understand the federal funding because there have been so many ways we've talked about it. I just want to be consistent.
I'd like to
about
see
it.
that number in there. That is. So we're getting 326
What
from
we
the
think.
federal government, but we're losing 700, and that's so it bound because it does give a clearer picture.
I do.
Yeah.
We're getting some, but we're not getting
Right.
some.
We're not getting some. Right.
Right.
We're getting some, but we're not nearly getting
Well,
what
show
we.
it-
More than
Yeah,
we're
show the
getting.
carryover.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Easy to
Very
do?
good.
And I do know that I saw some additional regulations came out on that carryover. I didn't read all the details. I'm sure you'll be getting those if you haven't gotten them yet, as to how they can be spent, what kind of employees they can be spent on, how you have to account for the money. I saw an email, I think, on Friday on that,
Yeah,
so
that
I'm
came out
sure.
very late
Was it
on
Friday?
Yeah.
Late Friday?
I'll
Yeah.
double check that, thank you.
If you don't
Yeah.
have it, just email.
Yeah, hopefully it's good. Hopefully it's good news. I get lost when I start reading all the
I didn't think it
details
sounded
of.
very good, but I'd rather Carl and Kathy look at it.
This is the Ed Jobs funding,
Yeah,
right?
Ed Jobs funding, right. There was
Okay.
the regulations coming down as to how it can be
I
spent.
didn't
and-
see that.
Okay, all right.
So one last question I have is, does this mean we're short 1,381,000 to clarify, or?
Well, this is stating that,
I know it's an increase.
yeah,
Over last year's budget, so.
Means we
next-
shot 900,000
If
based
we're
on
level
projected
funded.
revenues.
see, what happened?
900,000?
900,000, right, Mel?
Yeah, right.
Conservatively.
This budget of 24,525,063 that we have here that we're looking for the town, it's 900,000 short of what the town is projecting they can afford to spend on schools next year. I don't know if Kyle wants to better explain the 1.3
No,
million.
you said it well, and I think again, given what the purpose of this was, the purpose of this document today and this discussion today was to give us a general feeling for what we're looking
Oh,
at
I
next
see,
year.
okay.
As these sheets get updated, as the budget process unfolds, we'll add a line showing the present available funds figure.